welcome back, footy fans, to another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I am your host, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another AFL round review. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I am back. I took round 10 off. Unfortunately, scheduling sometimes can be a real pain. Plus, I have to use this time really quickly a huge congratulations to producer Ross, 1 year married to his beautiful and lovely wife, Phoebe. Congratulations to you two. Hopefully, to many years going forward. So let's hop into it. We will talk about round 11. I know we missed round 10, but we'll still get to talk footy. We are back, and joining me, a new face to the podcast, joining us from the Center Bounce podcast, also here on YouTube. We have Big J joining us today. Big J, great to see you, sir.
Thanks for having me on, mate. It's yeah, nice to be here. As I was saying off air, I've watched the show back from, when you almost had 100, 200 subs, and you're definitely doing a lot better with that, and content's getting better and better. So kind of exciting to be on the show instead of having to watch all the time.
Well, we appreciate, both Ross and I genuinely appreciate it, and I cannot wait to work with you. This is going to be so much fun. Let's jump into it. Round 11, the second half of Indigenous round, Sir Douglas
Mm-hmm.
Nichols round. Gotta ask really quickly, overall, overarching thoughts on a scintillating round 11.
I think it's a good time that we'll talk about Sydney's bye a little bit later, but I think it's really good that some teams have the bye this week because they're just struggling. I'll look at Brisbane, for an example, and mate, they haven't won a game in a while, and when they do win, it's against North Melbourne. So yeah, it doesn't look good for them. So a bye is good, a break's good, and yeah, some really good matches this week. I think some rounds, particularly round 10 and a few others before, they weren't as many exciting games. Like you've got the bottom teams playing each other, or there's just too many slaughters happening. Whereas the form of a West Coast and Hawthorn, who we'll talk about soon, they're actually up and about, which means that it's better footy to watch on TV.
Mm-hmm. 100% agree with you on that one. Let's jump right into it. Another controversy, but we'll try not to discuss that too much since
Mm-hmm.
we'll have plenty of time to talk about that in the burning question section. Thursday night footy sees the Sydney Swans get a 14-point win over the Western Bulldogs, 102-88. The Jekyll and Hyde form of the Western Bulldogs continues. A good performance. Unfortunately, the injury totals kind of hurt them as Ed Richards goes down, Aaron Naughton goes down, and I think there was one other one early in this game. But the doggies continue to fight, pushing the Swans all the way to the fourth quarter, but the Swans class, and Chad Warner, 4 goals, helps the Swans get a huge win.
Yeah, the Anthony Scott is the one that you're thinking of, and
Mhm.
he basically got knocked out in the first, let's say, 5 minutes of the game. So that kind of sucks for them. The thing with the Bulldogs versus Sydney is, yes, Sydney won, but injuries just took away every advantage that the Bulldogs has. Like a
Mhm.
lot of teams can't stop their three-pronged forward line with Norden, with Ugle-Hagan, and with Darcy in there. A lot of teams can't stop the run and carry through the middle with Ed Richards and Bont and those kind of things. But when injuries start to happen, slowly, the advantage turns into a normality. And that's where Sydney just comes out and it's like, cool, I don't need to worry about 3 forwards anymore. Now you've got 2. And now I can cover those kind of players. So, yeah, it was more the Bulldogs versus the injuries. And then Sydney came and swept them over versus kind of Sydney winning, I think, for a lot of this game. Yes,
Yeah.
Warner was fantastic.
No, I 100% agree with you. This game scared me as a Swanee supporter. This game scared me
Mm,
going into this because when the doggies want to, they can be absolutely scintillating. They can be one of the
yeah,
best teams in the entire competition. I mean, when you've got absolute megastars in Bontempelli, Trelaw in the center that are really good ball users, and then as you said, not Ugle, Hagen, and Darcy. It's like how do you guard all 3 of them? Because very few teams have 3 good tall
mm,
defenders. So, and then with no McCartan in for the Swans, I'm 100% with you on this one. I mean, the doggies did themselves no disservice. Do I completely agree with Bevel saying they were winners out of this? Not so much, because I think Ed Richards' injury really is going to test you come up this
yes,
week.
yeah,
But I'm hoping that they can continue this form because unfortunately they have really been Jekyll and Hyde. They've had games where they look absolutely like world beaters, and then there's games that I mean North Melbourne really has a shot of beating them if they play that particular way.
mm,
So again, and I take no veiled shots. Again, as Big J is a huge as a North Melbourne supporter, I mean that in no disrespectful way. it's kind of just become that situation for me. So I don't know. I the donkeys could baffle me a little bit. I just don't know what to say with them. It's like I can't put my finger on it. They're in this weird purgatory. They have the chance to be a really good footy team, but there are times that they just take their foot off the gas a little too much for me, which is very, very frustrating. But again, that was a great game. Gave me a little more stress than I wanted to
Mm.
On a Thursday early morning. But Swannies get the 4 points on that one. We jump out to Optus Stadium in an
Yep.
absolute cracking game. That if you look at this game at 3/4 time, you're thinking I should win this one. The Dockers come roaring back again. We'll have some more discussion on one of the situations that happened in this game a little
Yep.
bit later as the Dockers and the Pies draw 75-75. And if you're Harry Sharp, you are kicking yourself. This could have been 4 points for the Dockers if Sharp just could have kept that ball going between the big sticks.
Yeah, it's a game that Collingwood should have really won, and we'll touch on it now a little bit. But similar to last week, Collingwood's inability to kick goals have killed them. They
Mhm,
went 10 and 15, and for the fans obviously watching in the US or from wherever, that's 10 goals which are worth 6 points, and 15 points which are worth one each. So if they had converted any of those 15 into a goal, they would have won.
mhm,
Their inability to kick in front of goals really hurt, and yeah, it just meant that they couldn't hold the lead really. There were some dodgy calls potentially and things like that towards the end, but it's not the last 5 minutes of a game that determines a win or loss. It's what you do for that 3 hour period. So yeah, Collingwood typical 2 points, and then yeah, nice for Frio not to lose at home this week.
mhm. And I'm loving we're not getting this much of OMG, we got to get rid of the draw discussion, which is always
Yeah.
frustrates me because I think the draw makes things even more entertaining with that extra 2 points. So again, if you're a Dockers fan, you're kicking yourselves. You had a chance to win it. If you're a Pies fan, you probably should have won this one. Again, it's another one as your forward line injuries are costing you points a little
Mm-hmm.
bit because you can't kick more effective scores. So it'll be fun to watch both these teams going forward because both these teams should be in the finals hunt. We'll have to see
Yeah.
will some of these results actually cost them places in the ladder going forward.
It
So
it's
go.
been really tough for them as well because like what's his name? Not Darcy Fogarty. I'm just thinking of the forward that got injured and during the preseason. But Colling would have been able to cover their forward line with a lot of these small
McStay is who
forwards,
you're
and
thinking of.
McStay, yeah,
Yep.
with him being out, it's kind of hurt a lot, and Mason Cox is going to be out for a while as well. And Collingwood have been able to cover a lot of these key forward positions with really good, small to medium forwards, right?
Mhm.
You're looking at a Joe Richards, a Harvey Harrison, who's done really well, and then even like Sullivan, who's had a few shots on goal. And now Joe Richards is out for a prolonged period of time as well after doing his foot. So that's another forward that they're going to miss. The real
Mhm.
depth at Collingwood is starting to get tested. And that's somewhere where, like a Dogs that we are talking about before, they fall off because they don't have that depth. So we'll see what happens with Collingwood for the rest of the season.
Yeah, they're going to be a watch. They're going to be a watch because as they get
Yeah.
healthy, we'll see how things kind of go on that one. We jump down to Blundstone Arena down in Hobart for as my co-host called it in our exchange message prepping for this one.
Yeah.
The Jason Horn Francis Cup as Port Adelaide take
Yeah.
on North Melbourne. Port get the win by 59, 107, 48. As the diehard Roos supporter that you are, how difficult was this one to watch? Jason Horn Francis kind of have another day out against your beloved Roos.
Oh, it just happens. I mean, Ben Mackay did the same thing a couple of weeks ago when he played for Essendon versus us as well. And if you're a North Melbourne fan and you finally, or a North Melbourne player and you finally escape kind of the threshold, go to another club. Whenever you play us, you seem to do really well. So yeah, it was a tough one. Watch some of the highlights and just see the fumbling that happens. It's atrocious, and that's obviously shown by the scoreline and how dominant Port Adelaide were versus us, but then also it shows like the strength of a team that's pushing for finals that probably should make the semi-finals as a minimum, which is top four for those people that don't really know, versus us who, minimum bottom four this year, probably like 17th or 18th on the ladder, and just kind of the levels of competition of both teams.
Yeah, it's very this one is just shows you the differential between a team that should be fighting in the
Yeah.
deep part of finals compared to a team that really is still trying to figure out how to kind of approach this competition, unfortunately. So again, Port Adelaide, again, very good. Another setback for Connor Rosie. It will be interesting to see
Yeah,
how long that will set him back. Be
that
fascinated on that one.
it really feels like it's him. Like ultimately, I think it's the second time something similar has happened to him, where I think it was the game earlier on in the season where he had all those injury concerns, injury worries, came on when he probably shouldn't have, and then got like subbed halfway through the game. It
Mhm.
really feels like, I don't know if it's because he's the captain and he feels a need that he can't really spend too much time off the bench. He's got to come back on, minimize what probably should be a 3 week off to now like a 1 or 2 week off. Um, but Rosie's going to put himself in harm's way if he keeps doing this all the time. He really needs like a set block next week off, the bye week off, and probably 3 or 4 more games where he can just rest himself. Otherwise, he could be out for a season if he keeps doing this.
Yeah, it's probably best here to kind of for Ken Hinkley to kind of save his player from himself a little
Mm,
bit and just
yep.
say, hey, you're gonna spend the next month rehabbing, getting yourself cherry ripe. We're going to put a block of conditioning into you just so then you're back to full footy health. And then you'll come back after the bye when you're 100% ready to go. And I think that this is one of those where the coach has to kind of sit down Connor Rosie and go, hey, we're doing this for the best of your career, not
Yep.
just for this season. Because if we lose you during this season, that really hurts our chances going forward to potentially win a premiership. So
Mm,
I'm hoping Ken Hinkley does. He pulls this young superstar again. He's got tons of years of footy still left in him, but you don't want to hamper his career by having him continue to come back and getting these little niggles here and there that cost him a week or 2 weeks. And what if you do this and it costs you a game against the top side like an Essendon, like a Sydney? You don't want to lose those. You don't want to lose those games. You want to be as best. You want to have your best possible side as possible. So Hinkley's got to do something about that. And I'm hoping, crossing my fingers, he does because Rosie is a superstar. We want to see him on the park. We don't want to see him sitting in the medical room. So we jump
yeah.
down to Marvel. We jump up to Marvel Stadium as the Blues knock off the Suns 102-73 in an
Mm,
absolutely scintillating in a game that I remember looking at this game going, this is one of those, can the Suns pull the upset and get themselves into that? Can they be a finals team? Again, unfortunately, the Gold Coast seem to be very good at home, but once they go on the road, they tend to lose a little bit of that magic that they have at home.
yeah, 100%. As you say, Gold Coast up in Darwin, where the conditions are terrible, and they're the only ones that really train up there during the preseason and during the bye round breaks and things like that. It's a huge hometown advantage. But when they've got to travel, it really hurts. And yeah, this game was not a good game for them. Carlton are a very, very strong team. I know that we were talking about the Bulldogs before and about their different avenues to scoring and things like that. And the brilliance of putting a Zach Williams into the forward line and having him
Mhm.
kick a lot of goals, being that player that maybe he hasn't been throughout his career, but has had the attributes for, break line speed, a good mark, a good kick, that kind of thing. He's been almost kicked out of the back line and he hasn't been influential for a very long time. For him to actually now come in and do that in Indigenous round is like, hey, like there's another string to their bow. There's another. They've got one of the best key defenders. They've got two of the tools that have win Coleman's, and now they've got a really strong guy who can play small forward, who can crumb, who can run and kick. It's hey, watch out.
Yeah, they're a dangerous team. Again, they're not 100%. They're not 100%
Mm,
healthy. But the good thing is you have Cripps and Walsh to the center. Their spine is ridiculously good. I mean, if you
yeah.
really look at it, Wiedering is there. It's the center halfback position that I'm not 100% sure they've got 100% placed. You would think maybe a potentially either a Doherty when he's healthy or an
Mm,
Adam Sod on that halfback line. You've got Walsh, you've got Cripps through the middle with Akers out on the wing, and then you've got Harry Mackay and you've got Charlie Curnow through your forward center. So their spine is ridiculously good. Their issue that they're running into is their soft tissue injuries have cost them games this
yeah.
year, and a little bit of inconsistent play because sometimes they kind of almost, I know a lot of people said it with Swans, is that they're almost Harry and Charlie centric a little bit too much. They
Yes.
almost kind of go to the big guys a little too much. you've got guys like Durden. When Motlop and Martin are healthy, you've got other guys that are avenues to goal that you can get there. But the problem is they see big tall guy must kick to them. It's like the brain of the player that's kicking just instantly goes, they see tall guy, must kick, and they kick it to them, and it's willy-nilly, and it's just sometimes it causes all sorts of headaches, especially if they're defended well. Like, I mean, I think Mac Andrew played fantastic in this game. The issue is he can't guard both. So,
No.
I mean, and Collins is a good player, but Collins is undersized compared to those two. So whoever Collins got was the one that seemed to kind of get off the chain in this one. So Mac Andrew, I like I said, I got to tip my cap to that young man. He looked absolutely fantastic. I cannot wait to see him continue to grow. It was fantastic to see him, and then another one we'll talk about a little bit later when and Lecalier for GWS. Both
Mm.
shows why these two young superstars for the defense are going to be so much fun to watch as the years go on with their abilities. In fact, actually, it's a great transition to Lecalier as GWS go down to GMHBA and do it again. They knock off the Cats by 4, 78-74. And I have to say this, and I'll go to and normally I don't like talking about after the game type of stuff, but the vision of Lecalier getting selfies with some of those young men along the sideline, and then having somebody have to go out and go, "Hey, Lake, we want to do the song, mate. You're nowhere near."
It was pretty funny.
That was absolutely, but my best, it was so heartwarming because the
Mm.
boys could have just done the song and wouldn't have even realized. They're like, nope, we gotta have Lek. We gotta make sure that he's there. So
Well,
it's great
he
for the
won them the
mateship.
game.
Oh,
He
there's
won them
no
the
doubt.
game.
There's no
Yeah.
doubt. His last mark that he had definitely was one of the reasons that they won the game. But just legitimately, that was probably my favorite part about the entire game, was actually after just to see the warm reception that Lek got, and then him getting lost in it. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah. When you've got the two teams, and obviously you being a Sydney supporter, you got Buddy from Hawthorn. You kind of understand the nuance and how influential he was for that team. And just for the supporter base, GWS has always been the kid in the shadows a little bit, where they
Mhm.
haven't had that type of player. Yes, they've had Cornelio. Yes, they've had Josh Kelly. Yes, they've had a couple of these guys, Toby Green, Tom Green, that kind of thing, but never really that cult figure. Maybe a Lear as he progresses and as he builds his career. Hopefully, he stays at GWS. I know a lot of teams are going to be throwing huge money at him, but yeah, hopefully he stays and can really be that player for them.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be fantastic. I know I think he was one of those that played, he was in South Australia and played for Central
Mm.
District. So be interesting to see if some of the South Australian teams come a call in just to see if they can lure him back to where he played his state league footy. But I'm happy for Lek. He was one of those. I remember in his draft year, my draft expert, I kept saying, "Is there any way? Do you think Sydney would take a flyer on Lek Alair? I like him. I think he's got that athleticism in the back." And I so wish it could have happened. Unfortunately, GWS picked him up before Sydney had a chance to, but it made me chuckle a little bit to see him have such a great game. And I think he's progressing. The sad part is, I agree with him, is that he may get dropped because there's some defenders that still need to come back in. And you don't want to see him dropped, but unfortunately, with just the depth of talent that GWS has, is that unfortunately he's one of those that's kind of been up and down in the senior side and then back out again. So it'd be fun to watch again. GWS fantastic. I'm a little bit worried about the Cats. I think
Okay.
their midfield is a little bit too much patchworky with no
Mm-hmm.
danger right now. Parfit has kind of disappeared back into obscurity again after early in the season being fantastic. Bose has been hurt and then rested, and he just hasn't seemed to find his form back in. Unfortunately, if I saw right, both Blitzos is suspended for the next game. I
Yep.
think there's one
And
of
Jai
the
Clark as well.
Jai Clarkers. So
Yeah.
if I'm a Cat supporter right now, I'm a little concerned because the trend is not good. I mean, this is the first time ever that Coach Scott has ever lost four in a row. And you lost another one at home, which was the fortress of GMHBA Stadium, where very few teams go down and win. That's GWS's third time in a row down in GMHBA beating them, and the fourth time total. That's not a good trend for the Cats. And it is, and I hate going there because I know it's always used by the AFL medias. Is the too old too slow, or is it just, I mean, the patchwork midfield is just really hurting a team that's really good defensively, really good offensively, but their midfield right now is nowhere near good.
It's a real conundrum. If you look at kind of, being an Australian, maybe I get the analogy wrong, but if you look at the NFL and you have the Patriots and the Patriots post Brady, how dysfunctional they were a little bit, losing kind of that main cog and the main distributor, that centerpiece of the team. The
Mm-hmm.
Cats midfield over the last couple of years, 2 years ago, losing Selwood, Dangerfield kind of on his last legs now, things like that. Guys like Cam Guthrie and Menengola not really doing that much. They've
Mm-hmm.
put their influence and they've put so much pressure on the younger kids, your Tanner Bruin, um, those kind of players, even Max Holmes, as you say, running through there, playing a bit of halfback. There's so much pressure on them to perform that the problem with the AFL is the ball always starts from the middle. That's the thing. You score a goal, the ball comes back to the middle. So if you have trouble with that middle ball, and GWS is perfect. So look at guys like Tom Green, 17 clearances this week. Like it's a you just can't beat that. The ball is always going to be there all the time. So
Mm-hmm.
when that's your problem, you really, really struggle. And I think Geelong, maybe mid-season draft, they'll look at picking up somebody. The beautiful thing about Geelong, if we've got Geelong fans watching this game or watching the show, I don't know if you know much about Australia, but Geelong's like a big beach town, right? They're mad football fans. Everyone likes Geelong. Geelong produces a million really good kids that get drafted every year. There'll be superstars that go home to Geelong every year. And I don't think it's going to be a prolonged problem for them because they'll just pick up someone else.
Mm-hmm.
The next superstar will come, the next two or three will come. The team will rebuild really quick. But for right now, especially with injuries, with Patrick Dangerfield there, it's a real deficit for them.
Yeah, 100% agree that Geelong Falcons program is fantastic for breeding young great
Mm,
footballers, and that they do, they're kind of one of the few they're the only Victorian team that's not in Melbourne. So they almost have this little niche of, they're almost an interstate club without being interstate of
mm,
Victoria. They're this weird conundrum, and they've just done things right. They've done things in a way that most clubs have trouble doing, and that's being competitive, being in the hunt each year without really ever having to draft in the top 10. Like
yeah.
almost never. Is that a little bit of recruiting because they do find a way to bring home superstars like in Dangerfield? Absolutely. And bringing Cameron down there? Absolutely. But they they're one of those that they find diamonds in the rough. They take guys that mid 30s, mid 40s draft picks that they have a hunch on, and then they end up being right. I mean, Mark
I
Blitzops is one of the perfect ones. It was a steeplechaser, and look at, he is literally the utility knife of utility
mm,
knives. He can play every single position on the ground and look good doing it.
I would almost say the biggest strength of Geelong isn't necessarily their ability to bring players to the club who maybe have lived there. Obviously, it's a huge strength, right?
Mhm.
But their biggest strength is their ability to pick up really good players from their VFL team and identify those players throughout the state leagues as well. If you look at a
Mhm.
Tom Stewart, came from the state leagues. You look at a Brian Myers, came from the state leagues. All of these type of players, no one was going to go after,
Mhm.
and you don't have to spend draft capital to get them. You don't have to do anything. You just say, cool, we'll develop you, we'll pick you up. That's it. They become superstars. So I would almost say, similar to a Sydney, they're
Mhm.
really good at picking up mature age talent, those kind of guys
The
in the
rookie
later
draft
picks.
guys. Yep.
That's the same thing for Geelong. If you're a mature age player and you're good, guarantee Geelong's looked at you and guarantee you're probably a 50% chance to get picked up at some point by them.
Mhm.
And it just kills everyone else because it's like, well, I developed through the draft, whereas you developed through the state leagues, and you're getting mid 20-year-olds who are fantastic versus us that are getting 18-year-olds that take years to develop.
And even with some of that, sometimes is that they don't develop them as
Yes.
well either.
Yeah,
And Sydney is
exactly.
and both Sydney and Geelong have been, when they do get picks up near the top, they pick people that fit their system. Like
Mm-hmm.
the one thing you got to give both Sydney and Geelong is that they are very good at, sometimes they skip over super talented people to pick up people that are talented that fit their
Yeah,
system,
yeah.
more than just taking the flashy name in the draft, which you got to respect. It is one of those that some teams absolutely it
Mm.
makes them so it makes them very dirty, but
All their
Sydney and Geelong do it the right way, and I think a lot of clubs are starting to kind of see that you got to have a really good recruiter. If you can find a really good recruiter that can see diamonds in the rough. I mean, I have had this back and forth with a few people. It's like Sydney's academy is such an advantage. Okay, where'd Chad Warner come from?
yeah.
And they kind
Well,
of
that's it,
hesitate. Yeah, Western Australia. He was picked up 39. He was picked up 39th.
yeah.
How many teams had a
I
chance
think
to
as
pick him up?
well. I think as well, it's not even so much that it's cool. If we don't have any early draft picks, we'll wait a couple of years and then pick them, and we'll take them from somewhere else. So you
Hmm.
look at a Tanner Bruin, for example, top
Yep.
10 pick. Cool, going over to Geelong. Yeah, we've spent it picking the teams, but you've just given us a player with 3 years worth of development, that kind of
Hmm.
thing. Similarly with Oliver Henry as well.
Yep.
Good player, young kid, developing at another club. Cool, you come across immediate impact. So
Yep.
yeah, their team's just very good.
They're
And
just
I think they've
very
only
smart.
missed two finals in what 10 or 12 years. So
Yep.
kind of shows.
Yeah. Yeah. Last year was the first time they'd missed finals in like 10 years. It was
Mm,
insane. It's an insane record. It's something that again, many people would die for to be in finals every year except for one in a 13-year span is pretty impressive mark on that one. So we jump to dream time at the MCG as
mhm.
the Essendon Bombers beat the Richmond Tigers by 12, 86-74. The Tigers and Dusty Martin kind of having a more Dusty like performance, but the Bombers just a little bit too good. And the Bombers, with all of their woes when it comes to finals times, are sitting second on the ladder. I got to say, this came a little bit out of nowhere. I thought Essendon had a chance for finals this year, but I was not expecting second on the ladder 10, 11 rounds in.
Yeah, it's a real tricky one, right? Like if you look at the game, you look at the stats, Richmond's on the bottom of the ladder. Essendon's, you know, second on the ladder. Essendon did get Jordan Ridley back, which made a definite impact.
Mhm.
But you would have thought that Essendon would have come in and steamrolled. A lot of Essendon fans were very, very, very worried. I don't know if it's an Essendon problem or it's just more of a Richmond still a very good team, even though they're on the bottom of the ladder this year, because it's a lot closer of a game than I thought it probably would be. Uh,
Mhm.
Essendon back and forward earlier on throughout the game. Second quarter happened, halftime happened. They came home with the win, but mate, it was a tough one. And congratulations, as you say, Joe is my other co-host on the show with me. He's diehard Essendon supporter. He's gone mad. He's just like
Mhm.
finally all of this finals drought, everything. We're actually excited about playing because and excited about watching the team because it has been years of hell. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a page on Twitter and there's a page on Facebook. It's like seven and a
Mhm.
half thousand days before,
Since
like
they've
since
won a
Essendon
final.
won a final. Yeah,
Yep, I've
hopefully
seen
they
it.
break that this year. We'll see what happens.
I'm crossing my fingers as long as it's not against Sydney, I'm okay.
Yep.
So it'll be like I said, I guess I have a few friends who are huge Don supporters, and I do. I'm one of those. I want them just to be able to end that. When was the last time you won a final? Type of discussion. So I'm 100% with you again. They're getting performances from guys that are finally kind of showing how good they are. Zach Merritt has looked absolutely magnificent. He's taken that captain's role,
Hmm.
put it on his arm, and absolutely looked magnificent. The package, Jake Stringer does what Jake Stringer does. He finds a way to be that guy that he may not need a ton of touches, but the guy is magnificent with footy in hand. Peter Wright has done pretty well. You're seeing Nick Martin and the back line and Mason Redmond. Nick Hine kicks 2 goals in this game. And
Yep.
the good signing by Mackay. Mackay has come in and kind of established them defensively. I'm still not 100% sold on this Essendon team being a great defensive team until I see 5 or 6 more games of really good defense. I've seen them at their worst where they're like Swiss cheese. Everything has holes in it. So again, I'm gonna. I don't mean to tamper Essendon supporters fans, but again, we are 11 games in. They've still got several really good teams on their schedule. Let's see how those games go. If they get through them relatively unscathed, then the talk of Essendon potentially ending their finals thing could start to come out of my lips. But I'm gonna pause on that just the littlest bit. But again, huge win by
Now,
the Dons. And I'm happy for the Tigers because as woeful as they have been in a couple of these games, I love the competitiveness. It's great to see Dusty back. I'm looking at their injury list. It looks like over the next probably month, they're going to get 5 or 6 guys back. So they're going to go
Mhm.
from the most injury riddled team to a team that's going to be a lot stronger. This is not the easy beat Tigers team that they were earlier in the season. So they're going to be an interesting watch because I know everybody was like, is that North Melbourne's chance of getting a win over Richmond? My worry with that is that, but I think by the time they face each other, Richmond's going to have Hopper, Taranto, Grimes, and several of their superstars back by then. So we'll have to see. It's going to be interesting to watch this Richmond team as they are going. They could be that spoiler team that everybody kind of penciled in for an easy win. By the time you get them, they could be quite the daunting task. It'll be fun to watch that. Speaking of
Now
a
there's
team,
there's
go ahead.
one player that you haven't mentioned
Hmm.
that I'm going to put light to for two reasons. Because the guy's fantastic. Well, let's say three reasons, right? The guy's
Okay.
fantastic. Mid-season draft is happening tomorrow. I'm not sure what that is your time, but um, and the fact that him and another player are now getting blooded because of Parrish being out, and kind of it's always been a Zach Merritt best player, and then the rest, right? With
Hmm.
Essendon, Sam Durham
Hmm.
is someone that you didn't want. This kid is a freak. He has come into the season. So he was a mid-season draftee for those that aren't familiar with him. Has been a good player, but never anyone stellar. He completely changed his body shape. He came in the fittest that he's ever done during the preseason, and he's just dominated. He has taken what was Parrish's midfield role and has just turned it into his own. He has been phenomenal. And, 15 touches, 14 contested possessions on the weekend, the most for any player. Yes, his disposal efficiency wasn't great, but he is just dominating and he is the real strength. Essendon's getting better, and it's crazy to think that this player is getting better and better every week. He's going to push them into finals and just carry games off his back, which he kind of did with this
Hmm. No, no, 100%. And the fact that he's had a couple of chances where he's been that run
one. Yep.
with player and has been able to shut down some of the elite midfielders of the competition. You got it again. It just shows you that sometimes you don't have to be that 18-year-old superstar that goes at the top of
Mm-hmm.
the draft. You just have to be the right player in the right system at the right time, and anything is possible. So it's huge on that one. We jump to it, probably what most would say is the upset of the round as the Hawks. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the Hawks at Marvel Stadium knock off the Brisbane Lions 175, a 25-point win, and the Lions' miserable run of a season just continues.
Yeah, it's a real tricky one with the Lions. I mean, they should have won this game. Hawthorn haven't been that good, but the stats don't really lie. And the Hawks are one of those teams that they had some upset wins last year. They
Hmm.
had some games that they shouldn't have won that they did. And the Hawks on a good day, you can really see what Sam Mitchell is building because
Hmm.
they're pulling wins off teams that have made finals last year and are pulling wins off teams that, are just phenomenal. So fantastic for them to get the win. Worked out really well. Hopefully, Lloyd Meek isn't out for a long time, but there is some issues with Cinders Moses, I think, and kind of fell on his knee towards the middle of the game and hasn't recovered yet. And that can really affect their ruck stocks. But yeah, bloody fantastic win for them. Players just going bang, bang, bang. And you can really see what the coach is building. If I was a young kid and I'm like, torn between a couple of clubs, and you're looking at the bottom four and who's offering me a contract, mate, I'd be going to Hawthorn.
Hmm. Yeah, and you're seeing the emergent Will Day coming back into the scene,
Mm-hmm.
being healthy too. I think has
Yeah.
really helped because Warple's been kind of up and down, and unfortunately, he had some really good games there for a bit, but he had kind of stagnated and went backwards a little bit. Will Day stepped in, and again, he's shown why he was a top draft pick. Again, super talented. This is a Hawks team that they kind of I've said it a few times is that some of their best players could pop out of your Wheaties and you have no idea who the hell they are.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's they're literally a bunch of no names except for a few. But they get the job done. Coach Mitchell when these guys are on, they're bloody difficult to play because they're scrappy as all hell. They're scrappy as all hell. They just don't give up. Yes, you lost that game to Port Adelaide last week on the dying seconds because a little bit of coaching and a little bit of I think they kind of went into their shell far too quickly. But this was like they responded. this is exactly as a coach, you're smiling at yourself. You're going, they responded to the change. They did not let this game get away like they did the last one, and then kind of put a little bit of a hurting on Brisbane towards the
Mm,
end. So you got to say this is positive. This is going to be a Hawks team. They're going to shape the finals. They are
yep.
going to shape the finals because they are going to find a way to give a team like Collingwood or Carlton or Sydney or one of these teams that has a chance for finals, they're going to nip them because that's how good they're playing. They're going to shape who is and isn't going to make finals this year, which is always fascinating when a team towards the bottom of the ladder is going to play upset. And it's always fun because it makes things so much more interesting as the year goes on.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that similar to a Collingwood, how we were saying earlier, right? Brisbane kicked 10-15. A
Mhm.
lot of their goal scorers weren't firing. Charlie Cameron, three behinds. Look at Joe Danaher, probably should have kicked 3 goals instead of 2-1. And some of their midfielders as well that maybe should have converted, probably would have changed the cycle for them. So, yes, they did do well, but maybe not taking the opportunities that came to them. And congrats to Gunston on winning against his former side because I know a lot of players like take that in. And he kicked 4 goals on the weekend, so he would have been pretty happy.
Yeah, former side one season and then back to
Well,
Hawthorne.
that's it's still former side.
I know it makes me chuckle a little bit just to hear that for sure. So, all right, we move to the last two and we're gonna kind of lump these two a little bit together a little bit because
Yep.
both kind of were the same thing, and it was a trouncing by one team good, one team not so good.
Mm,
You look at the first one between Melbourne and St Kilda, and let's just be honest, this one the score flatters St Kilda because
yep.
Melbourne was the better team. Melbourne were dominant. Max Gawn again shows why he's most likely going to be donning the Ruckman's spot for the All Australian because he has been absolutely sensational this season. Jack Viney plays well. The superstars playing really well for this Melbourne team. Again, do I put a lot of stock on this as a Melbourne team that's premiership? Again, I still have questions over their forward line, but this is one of those they get some confidence into this group against the St. Kilda team that again, I'm still sitting here going, Ross, what the are you doing? Like you have so many running players, yet you still play this dour version of football. It's very, very annoying.
Yeah, it probably comes down to two players that either have come back and played different roles or kind of just played different roles in general. Christian Salem finally coming back from injury,
Mhm.
dominant 32 possession game and just looked fantastic. I mean, he was rated second in fantasy sports for the game. So you can kind of show just how influential he is. And on the other side as well, people talk about how good Jack Sinclair is as a player. And yes, he's fantastic, but this experiment of putting him in the middle, he can get a lot of possessions. But as we've seen this year, and the opposite, as we've seen how good he is off half back, there's just no influence for him through the middle. He's a short player. He'll get a lot of touches, but they don't really seem to go anywhere. And yes, he did kick a goal, but I think almost every game that he's been in the middle, they've lost this year. They're missing Brad Crouch. They're missing some of that engine room. So I can understand why he's through there. But you're not playing guys like Garcia, who had 24 touches and 12 tackles in the VFL. Brad Crouch is coming back from injury, that kind of thing. They're in a lot of bother. Similar to a Geelong, where like when you don't win the middle, you don't win the game. That's what St Kilda's been dealing with.
100%. And then I hate to jump right off that because I know the D's fans, again, super big win, but I this one's a flattering one. The 38-point win is flattering to St. Kilda, but even
Yeah,
less flattering is this next one as the Adelaide Crows absolutely handed the smacketh down on the West Coast Eagles, 137, 38, and 99-point win. Darn it, Crows. Why can't you get one more point and make it an even 100? Just kidding. Crows fans, again, fantastic. Again, this game was to bed after the first quarter. I mean,
yeah,
I remember watching a little bit of the Melbourne game, and I looked down at the score, and it was like Adelaide already had like a 45-point lead, and it was only like halfway through the first quarter. I'm like, well, that one's already over. So Crows just too good. And again, Eagles, again, they continue kind of several great games and then a little bit of a dip again. Harley Reid's not going to be absolutely magnificent every single game. I don't think he was too bad in this game, but something was just off for the Eagles right from the start, and it just went downhill from there.
Yeah, they really don't travel well. I mean, we look at Harley Reid's stats, as you say, 7 free kicks for, two against, but he was just getting targeted across the field. He's really their only superstar. Elliot Yo's still recovering from injury. And as I said, that when they play in WA, they're a much different team than when they are
Mhm.
here. I don't know if they like ate something dodgy on the flight or got stuck in business class for too long. I don't know if any of the fans can understand the reference there, but
I got
yeah,
it.
it's Adelaide at home are a different beast as well. So you've got a team that
Hmm.
doesn't travel versus a team that is perfect at home.
Hmm.
It was like this, and sad to see it wasn't the almost 200-point thrashing that Sydney gave West Coast last year, but mate, it was pretty close.
Yeah, that was a witch's hat game. I remember watching. I
Yeah.
remember watching it. I've said it a couple times in the podcast. I remember sitting at the end of the game going, "Did I just seriously see that? Like legitimately, it wasn't. I wasn't bouncing for joy. I wasn't. Super, I was literally sitting there going, "Did I just see 200 points in an AFL match?" Like
Yeah.
legitimately just it just broke my brain. I don't know why, but it absolutely broke my brain. So that is all 9 games of Sir Douglas Nicholls' second part of the round. Fantastic. Absolutely love that. We jump to it. Burning questions. And I'm very interested on this because I swear this was the round that every single thing turned into a huge freaking news story. Every single
Mhm.
outlet was talking about it. Was this, it was this, it was this, it was this. We'll go to it. I know I had to kind of explain this to you via our instant messages that I kept hearing this over and over and over again in the Swans Bulldogs matchup as how the Swans got this great advantage because they get the next bye round here in round 12 after also getting a bye round over over round 3
Mm.
or 4 earlier in the season. Is this your thoughts on this? Because I'll tell you mine just in a little bit, but I don't think this is as big of an advantage as a lot of people are trying to make this out to be.
Look, I think in any sports, in anything like this, where a fixture happens, there's going to be some teams that win the fixture for a year and some teams that don't. Now, some things might need to change a little bit if the four, or sorry, if the eight dominant teams are the ones in the AFL that play round zero and everyone else has the week off. Maybe they'll change around the teams and kind of give someone else a chance a little bit next year. But I can understand where people are saying, cool, an early buy at the start of the season and then a good buy later on. I don't know if there would be that much trouble if they had like the round 15 buy instead of round 12. It is a nice time to have a break. But if Sydney were a crap team this year, but sorry for saying, if Sydney
That's fine.
were on the bottom of the ladder, would anyone really care? Probably not.
Nope.
It's just the fact that they're like first on the ladder and they're doing well.
Hmm.
So it's just circumstance more than anything else, I
Yeah.
think.
No, I'm 100% with you, and this is me personally. If I put my red hat on, if I put my Swans hat on, honestly, I don't like the round 12 bye. The reason that I don't
Yeah.
like it is because we got to get to round 24. So the Swans are going to have one of the longest stretches now through the end of the season
Yeah.
until the pre-finals bye. So if I'm the people that are complaining that why are the Swans? It's like you are aware now the Swans now have the longest section between now and the pre-finals bye of consecutive games.
Yeah.
Whereas like if I'm a Swans fans, honestly, the perfect situation would have been to get that early bye and then get round 15 as well. That last round, the last section or round of the buys for the regular buy section for all of the
Mm-hmm.
teams. So I'm sitting here going, I don't think it's as big an advantage as people are trying to make it off to be. I think this is a storm in a teacup. I really don't get it why people are making such a big deal out of it. I think it's actually a disadvantage personally. Like I said, you have now 3 rounds after starting at round 13, 14, and 15, where other teams are getting a bye. So they're getting the rest later. So
Yeah.
they have less games to play between now and the pre-finals bye. So I don't think it's I don't I think the stink I think this is one of those Victorian stink because a non-Victorian team is playing well. They don't like it. I don't know why.
Probably.
It's a very again, I hate breaking it down that simple, but sometimes it's just the way it comes off. It's like listening to the announcers. If you listen to some of these certain announcers, I will not speak some of their names. Most of you who listen to the podcast know some of the ones that I have issues with. That when they are calling a Victorian team versus an interstate team, everything that the Victorian team does wrong is what's pointed out, not what all of the good things that the interstate team does. And I find it fascinating. It's an interesting little tidbit that certain people like to listen to. Some people don't, but it's always fascinating. So we'll get off that topic again. I don't like talking about that type of stuff. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's just it's people blowing smoke that should just really just forget it. But that's
Yeah.
me personally. We'll jump to the next question, and I've heard this, and I'm fascinated to hear what you have to say on this one. Does the AFL have an injury problem?
I mean, if you're Ken Hinkley and Connor Rosie, you probably have an injury problem. But I think the issue is with the AFL is if you look at the 70s, 80s, 90s, even the 2000s, the players are not the athletes what they are now. The game is not as competitive. They don't run as much. They don't move as much on field. Not as much as emphasis is put on agility, on making tackles, that kind of thing. People say the game was rougher. Sure. People walked up and punched each other in the face and they didn't get suspended. That's how it was rougher.
Mhm.
It was not the toll that was put on the body. And I think just as the game gets more mechanical, you're going to see a little bit more of those injuries. Unfortunately, some players, maybe some teams might have had a few other problems, things like that. But that's just the nature of the game. As the game's getting better, as it's getting stronger, things like that, the players are getting better, the players are getting fitter. When those injuries do happen, they're more of an impact on the bodies than just
Mhm.
like what it would have been previously, I think.
Yeah, and I think it also again, and I hate going here, but it seems to be a theme. I'm sorry, but it depends on what team is having the injuries,
Yes.
whether it's being talked about. Because you
Yeah.
notice Collingwood and Carlton, two of the bigger teams in the competition, have a ton of injuries. Now all of a sudden, the media, OMG injuries.
Yeah.
What were you guys talking about last year when West Coast had to sign Lewis Jetta and somebody else just to play on their waffle side, so then their waffle side could play a game?
Yeah.
I don't remember
or
you saying
or
anything about
North
that.
Melbourne. It's happened to North Melbourne before as well, where
Hmm.
10, 12 players were injured in at one period of time. And it was like, oh, well, too bad. So I totally agree. And I think it's a also a case of as well, if your depth is really good in the team, if the list is really strong, it
Hmm.
doesn't get talked about as much either because you've always got people to cover,
Exactly.
like people being out, that kind of thing. So
Yeah,
it's just circumstantial again.
again, I love you, Fly McRae. I really do. But you're trying to paint over something and try to make it something that it's just not. It's just not. You're trying to put a cat costume on a dog and call it a cat. It's just not working, bud. I'm sorry. I don't. You have injury issues. The entire competition doesn't have injury issues. You do. Carlton does. A couple other teams do, but that's it. I mean, injuries happen. There have been seasons where a team has had 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 injuries. It happens, as you said, with the more high performance training that most of these guys are going, sometimes the body's going to break down. And one time you're going to have a year where the luck isn't there. We all look at Richmond this year. But look at Richmond in 2017 when they had that incredible season. Nobody got hurt. Like the entire season, I swear to you, nobody got hurt for that Richmond team. So it's just all really luck and how kind of things go. I know people don't want to go there, but it's the truth. Sometimes
Yeah.
you just have a season where you walked under a damn ladder and 14 guys have knee injuries. That's just the way it
Or
goes.
or during COVID, I'm not sure if the US was affected as bad as what Australia was, but during COVID, where West Coast couldn't field a team because of quarantine, so they
Mhm.
had to bring like state league players to play a couple of games.
Yep.
It just happens, right?
Yeah. So it's like I think this is another one of those where it's the squeaky wheel gets the oil is the reason why people are talking about an injury issue. I don't think there's an injury issue. I literally think it's just certain clubs with big voices are sounding off and the media is running with it, and it's just really, really annoying. So we'll jump to it. We'll again, this is kind of the fun week because again, there's so many different great conversational topics here. Controversial calls. Again, I've said it numerous times. I try not to discuss the umpiring, but again,
Mhm.
everybody won't shut up. Is it the 50 that was given to Sydney late in the game that really sealed that game up? Was it the controversial pass to the opponent that was given a free kick that helped lead Fremantle's come back to get them in the draw?
Yeah.
It's like everybody's going on and on about these. Your thoughts on this? Because as I said, umpires are going to make calls. Were these calls the reasons the team got a loss or a draw? I don't think 100%. Did they lead to it? Yes, but I think this is one of those by the letter of the law for both calls. By the letter of the law, they were correct.
It's an interesting one. I think round 11 was a real tricky one because there were a lot of calls during games, especially during the Dogs game, during the Collingwood Freo game as well, where it felt like the umpire just put the whistle away.
Hmm.
It's always been a big thing in the AFL where, cool, the last 2 minutes of the game, we don't call anything because it's just like it's scrappy. Everyone's kind of going hard and things like that. I said to you before the episode started today, the AFL is really one of the only sports where umpires' calls is so biased. It's so favoritism against one team or the other team, or cool, maybe as an umpire, I don't like a certain side or I want to punish someone, or, just the interpretation is there, right? NFL's got cool. When they're all like this is it, straight bang, that's it.
Hmm.
I can officiate the game, you can officiate the game. Joe Blow down the street can officiate the game because the rules are there. The AFL is so subjective, and I think that's the only issue. What it really is this
Hmm.
year, previous years, they've tried to bring in more umpires, and that almost has made it worse. There's so many balls that go over the boundary line that aren't called, bad calls throughout the game. It's probably one of the biggest problems, and I don't know if they can fix it, but we just have to deal with it. I think, though, going back to people kicking behinds, it's not one or two bad calls during a game that loses you the game.
Hmm.
It's the way that your team plays for those 3 hours. If my team kicks 22 behinds and scores 2 goals, it's not the umpire's fault that we lost. It's our goal kicking, right?
Hmm. 100% with you on that one. And I've stated it, will continue to say it's if you ever watch my tweets watching any of the games, I know some people will constantly call, what is this umpire looking at? You will never see a tweet from me talking about umpiring. I will not
Mm,
discuss it, or I will give one quick quote on it. And usually it's interesting umpire decisions. I won't say whether it's bad or good. I'll say interesting because like that can be interpreted either way. I will never go there because again, I don't think I can an umpire change a game? Absolutely. They can flip the game on its head momentum wise. Can it
yeah.
win you a game? Absolutely not, because the team on the field has to be the one to capitalize on that situation. So it's still the team that's going to win the games. It really annoys me when I see this. Oh, look at that. Look at that. The Western Bulldogs have three extra guys in green. I'm like, seriously, come on. I
Yeah.
don't think it is not that. It may seem like it, but it is not that. There's
Yeah.
nobody getting paid on the side. There's no, because trust me, if it happened and it got discovered, it'd be the biggest drama ever, ever, ever in the competition.
Mm,
It becomes off hyperbole. It's so overblown. Do I understand that there are calls that are going to ruffle certain one-eyed fans' feathers? Absolutely. It's gonna happen. You're gonna somebody's gonna get the Mickey taken out of them when it comes to it. You're not gonna get the rub of the green. Sometimes you just have to play the game despite the umpires, and it's going to happen. So it's just very frustrating that every single news outlet, every single podcast has to talk what's wrong with the umpiring. I don't think anything's wrong with the umpiring. I think the way the rules are being adjudicated, the way they're written, there's so much gray area. What I think is holding the ball may not be what you think is holding the
mm,
ball, which may not be Michael on the end of the street thinks is holding the ball. So there's just when you have human beings umpiring games, errors are going to happen. It's can they minimize the errors to be the least amount of as possible. If they can do that, they've done a good job, or at least be consistently shitty both ways. If you're shitty, like if you don't call something, don't call it both ways. I have then no problem because I know how you're going to umpire. But it's
yeah.
when it looks like it's one way and you umpire another team another way, then it becomes very, very annoying. And I totally get when fans have that problem. So,
And then it's just like Nick Dacos, who got the bad, dying minutes of the game. There was a bad call. Cool. Just give the ball back to the umpire.
Yep. He's
Let's
like,
keep
shut up.
playing.
He's
There's
like,
two
yep,
minutes left. That's it. Like,
yep.
let's not complain about it. We're wasting time here. So
Yep. I
should
gained a
be,
lot of respect for Nick because he could have whinged all he wanted on
yeah.
that one. But nope, he's like, because a couple of his teammates started to go with the umpire. He's like, nope, set up, don't worry about it. Let it go, set up. And like he was like telling, I loved that from him. I got a lot
Mm,
of respect for Nick Dacos because he knew you can't let it affect you and take you out of the game. You still have to play the game. Like I said, I respect Nick Dacos even more for that. That was magnificent. So we'll go to it. As I say a lot of times, when I have a fan, when I have a co-host that is a big supporter of a team, I like to ask a question, and I want to let you have your vent, sir. Unfortunately, as a Roos supporter, another tough loss like against Port Adelaide. I'll let you have your soapbox, sir. What do you think is the problem with the North Melbourne Footy Club?
Well, I mean, I know what the problem is. I guess kind of, I'm going to flip it on its head a little bit.
Sure.
Can you tell me before I give my answer, what do you think the problem with the North Melbourne Football Club is right now?
I think a few years ago they cut too deep and they've never been able to catch up. The year that they cut DeSanto,
Mhm.
Harvey, and all that, I think they cut too deep. I think they cut too many veterans. They tried to go too young, and then they've ever since then they've splashed the cash on so many eh, free agents that they've never really ever recovered from that because their youngsters are basically being thrown to the wolves because they have no veteran leadership. And the veterans that
Mm.
they are getting to come there are literally they're, I mean, I hate to say it, they're like leeches. They're sucking the
Yeah.
money and leaving. I mean, that's this just simply the way it is.
The biggest problem that I see with North Melbourne is that from the periods of, let's say, 2010 to probably 2018,
Hmm.
we've had, or maybe 2016 is a better thing. There were, let's say, 40 people who were drafted or 35 people have drafted. We've only kept three or four of them, and that's it. And I think right now on the list, we might have two. Um, that's the biggest issue with North Melbourne. We do not have players who are good between the ages of 24 and the ages of 29. All of those ages group that I mentioned, they would have been drafted in that period of time. Go
Hmm.
back to North Melbourne's drafting history, things like that. Speculative picks were spent on players who probably shouldn't have been, where other superstars were taken at later picks. Things like that just killed us because
Hmm.
we've got okay older players, we've got good young kids coming through. It's that group which is the toughest, and it's that age group players coming into their prime that are the hardest to bring to a club that's bottom of the ladder and that doesn't look like it is going to come up the ladder. That's the biggest issue with North Melbourne, and that's just followed along, right? Cool.
Hmm.
When old players retire, we don't have the good players coming through. Old players retire again, we don't have the good players coming through. So now we have a big disparity of cool, we've got guys who are 30, 31, 32, and then we've got guys who are 18, 19, 20, but no one really good through the middle. Like an LDU will get a game at other clubs, but no one's really jumping at your heels to sign a Jai Simkin type, right? Like
Hmm.
it's just it's the biggest issue with us really, and hopefully we can bring players in. I totally agree with what you're saying about pull the leech players, things like that, but they're all role players, and some have been okay and some have been pretty terrible. But that's just been the previous drafting. And now Clarko's come in. And one of the biggest problems with the AFL, so NFL, for example, let's use this as an example. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but at certain points throughout the year, players can get traded to other clubs, right?
Hmm.
Players, against their will, players can get traded to other clubs. They can get cut. Things like that can happen, correct?
Hmm.
Yeah. So in the AFL, there's one period of time that your list can change. And now they've done mid-season draft in the middle. That's
Hmm.
literally the end of the year. So if you've come into a new business like Clarko has, half the players are on shitty contracts. You can't do anything about it. If they've
Hmm.
been given 5 years by the previous administration, that's it. You're just stuck. You have to wait for those 5 years to go unless you can convince the player to leave because they have the right to say, no, I'm contracted to this club. I'm not moving. I'm on my contract. Too bad for you. And then you'll get the adversity. You can get made looking like you're a bad coach because we've given this bad player a
Hmm.
big contract. So he's just there's not much you can really do as a new coach. All you can do is come end of the season, delist the bad players, hopefully recontract the new ones, and that's where the slow rebuild in the AFL happens. If it's like a
Hmm.
slippery slope, right? If you can't do much, then you're just stuck.
Yeah, it's the one difference, and I know that it's already been a topic, and unfortunately, from what I hear, unfortunately, the midseason trade period that
Mm,
the AFL was thinking about bringing up, and I know you get some of the staunch, shall we say, traditionalists that are like, well, what are we doing? Da, 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 da. And I'm like, I loved the idea personally. I think it'd be fantastic. The issue that you run into with doing it over, at least in Australia, is that the financial compensation is much different. Like as you
yep,
kind of said, you could somebody that you don't want, you can trade. Yeah, but that's also because that person is making anywhere between $900,000
yep,
and 2.5. It's very easy for them to use that money that they have been paid to relocate to their city. Or this is the only reason why I disagree with the people that are like, well, if what if you trade somebody from Adelaide to Sydney and he's got to move his family? Why does his family have to move? If you trade
mm,
mid-season, you're only halfway through the year. Let your
yeah,
family stay in Adelaide. You move to Sydney, stay there, get things set up, and then move your family when you know you're going to stay, because this could be a situation where, as at least in the NHL and NFL, is you have rental players. You have people,
yep,
you bring them in for the end of that year, and that is it. They are a veteran. I'll bring up, and again, I'm not trying to bring up old wounds here. Todd Goldstein,
yep,
my perfect example for the longest time was Geelong wanted a ruck. Geelong
yep,
wanted a ruck. Think about 5 years ago when Goldie was really going. You could have gotten Geelong's first round draft pick for Goldie. It could have potentially expedited the rebuild because you get a top first round level pick, so then one of the top 20 kids in the country in, and Goldie gets his shot to go shoot for a premiership, and you treat the guy with the respect that he deserves. That's the difference. Like, and I understand so many, in I'm hearing all these people going, well, it's going to give an advantage to the Victorian teams. Well, yeah, because there's 10 teams there. That's the
yeah,
obvious one. But if you're Brisbane, if you're Sydney, if you're GWS and you're one player short, I think that player from Victoria is going to find a way to get to you to play for you if they
yeah,
want to win a premiership. So I'm like, I understand your argument that it may benefit them, but you also got to look at it too, is that what you're saying is you don't think you're good enough to get the guy to come up in a trade. If you're playing really well, like Sydney this year, right now they don't look like they have any empty spots. But say they're one forward short,
mm,
and Tommy Hawkins, Geelong's not
yep,
playing well. Tommy Hawkins wants to play for another premiership. You could trade your first round pick for Tommy Hawkins to put in that side to have a chance to win a premiership. I know it's pie in the sky. I think it'd work. I think the interstate squads need to let it happen. I don't right now. It's not looking very good, but we'll have to see
mm,
again. But it's one of those where again, it's a little bit Americanized. I know. So again, the traditionalists are losing their freaking skulls, but in some situations, it could help rebuilds go faster because you're going to get first round draft picks or second round draft picks as compensation for these players that maybe aren't going to be on your list for very much longer or are going to leave during free agency after the season's over anyways. So you would get a compensation pick around the same thing, where this way you get that pick and you have it. You don't have to worry about, okay, well, if they sign a contract for this amount of money, it's going to be this. Nope, you're already going to know. You got their second round pick already. You already know, or their first round pick. There's
yeah.
none of this thinking about it.
I've been a big advocate. People will know me if they know me personally and on the show. I've been a big advocate of changing the way that contracts work and have players contracted by the AFL and effectively playing for a club, have the loyalty to the club, but then the AFL owns the contracts, which means that they can move around a lot more freely,
Mhm.
give a lot of the power back to the clubs, say, cool, there's nothing stopping me. If I get a 5 year contract as an AFL player, I can perform terribly in that period of time. My club can't do anything against getting rid of me.
Mhm.
Like I'm sure there's penalties, might be performances. Cool, I don't earn some cash money for being there, but there's no negative for that. So change it around, force players to be able to move. I'm more than happy to say, cool, you've moved into state. Here's a bunch of money. Here's 300K, here's 200K, whatever it is to relocate your family. I'm more than happy to do that. If the
Mhm.
AFL wants to fork that out, if the even if the club that you're going to says that has to be part of the contract. They have to pay the relocation fee for going interstate. I'm more than happy to. That should be enough for most people to bring their family across, rent a place, any relocation travel fees they have to pay. More than happy to say that that's not a big problem.
Hmm.
Um, but there need to be a lot more player movement in the AFL, and I'm more than happy to try and work out a way to facilitate that. I mean, if
Yep.
the AFL wants to hire me, I'll figure that out. But yeah, there just needs to be a lot more. I understand loyalty to a club, no worries, but that more comes down to if it's mutual, if the club wants to keep you and the player wants to stay, versus you can perform terribly and like you can just never get cut, or
Hmm.
you can never get kicked out because you've signed a contract, or what's happened with North, 5, 6, 7 year contracts for guys that aren't even going to be playing, that aren't
Hmm.
very good, but because the previous list manager that's also like obviously been like suspended or fired for his poor choices, now that the next people have to deal with it. So
Yep.
yeah,
It's
it's
your
just a
it's
bit
your
of a
headache.
struggle
No,
now.
I
Yeah.
completely agree. Like, and I think and for that, it would open up a few more options for teams to rebuild quicker. Because
Yes.
if you can get free agents and be able to move off horrible contracts much easier, I think in the long run it actually would work out better. Again, how you do that, because unfortunately the players association are going to nix anything that's going to take away any.
Mm.
Again, it's the
Yep.
issue that you run into. Like over here it's the exact opposite. It's the owners that have so much influence, like they can literally nix anything. So it's like I wish there was a way to take a little bit of what we have over here with the owners power compared to the players power over in the AFL and do something like 50-50 in between, to where neither has a ton of power. Like it is one of those where it's very neutral, but I don't know. It's a utopian thing. I don't know. We won't go
Yeah,
there. So
it's stopped being a business in the AFL. It's not like that anymore. It's
pretty
power to the
much.
employees, and then like the owners can't do anything. So
Yeah, and the fact that you can
not
tell
owners,
people
but
where you want to be traded to
yep,
such a foreign thing for
yep,
me over here in the States. Like literally, like
yep,
you go where they're going to get their best deal, not where you want to go,
yep,
unless you know what teams are being traded, like the no trade clause that we have over here in the States, where it's like you can say, hey, I don't want to be traded to this team, this team, this team, this team, and this team, and they can submit a list of 10, and those are the teams that you can't be traded to,
yep,
is about the closest thing that the player has. And that's an interesting one there. But again,
yeah.
I guess it's all how we handle it.
It's
So
like imagine if your job and my job and everyone else's job, if you perform poorly, you don't meet your KPIs, you don't decide not to turn up for work, and when you do, you get drunk and do whatever. Cool. Well, like I get fired, right? You get fired, everyone else gets fired. The
mhm,
AFL players don't get fired. Like there's nothing.
yep,
Once you sign that magical dotted line, cool. I'm safe for the next 3 years. Like I can be shit
mhm.
and do whatever and study at uni because that's what they're pushing a lot of. And yeah, cool. Well, that was my career. I got paid a bunch of money and didn't do much, but sucked in if you're the new list manager or new coach that comes across because your team's performing poorly.
Yeah, pull your head in, mate. Pull your head in. That's
Yeah.
awesome. All right. Well, let's get off the negative and go to, like I said, I love Indigenous round. I love the Sir
Mm-hmm.
Douglas Nichols round. It's my favorite rounds of the year. I gotta ask. Take North Melbourne and I'll take Sydney out. What is your
Yep.
favorite jumper of another club that you saw this over this last 2 weekends?
It's a club that I just love the color scheme, and I think that the media team, the color scheme, everything's just been bloody amazing. It's GWS.
Mhm.
GWS, their two colors, just that orange and like charcoaly color, just opens up so much. And their Indigenous jersey, it's another win for them. Every
Mhm.
year it comes out with something fantastic, and I don't know if you can, your editor or whoever can pull it up on the screen, but mate, it looks bloody fantastic.
Yeah, it's actually magnificent. I love it. Again, they may be the rivals, and my producer is a huge GWS fan, so
Mm,
he'll chuckle as he watches this. I got to give it to the Adelaide Crows. I thought the Crows Guernsey was absolutely gorgeous. I loved that Guernsey. I thought it was absolutely magnificent. There isn't one that I hated. Like I literally loved
no.
all of them. If I could find a way to find a way to get every single one of them, I would, because they all looked absolutely
Mm,
sensational. I've already told my wife that's my birthday gift to myself next year is the new Indigenous Guernsey from this last year for the Swans, because I love it. I have my swan. I have the black swan from a few years ago. I'm gonna have to get this new one because I think it's absolutely fantastic. I absolutely love the design. I thought it was
and I'm not going to
awesome.
hate on North Melbourne too much, but I think something's lost. Like, I don't know if you know much about Indigenous culture, but colors and theme and everything else is such a big part of their culture that if
Hmm.
you're a club that's only got two colors in their like system,
Hmm.
you can really tell the difference between some of the clubs that have three colors and they can show the vibrancy and everything there versus
Hmm.
maybe in North Melbourne where cool, like the patterns are great and the symbolism and everything's really there, but it's not that massively colorful thing just because you're hampered by what colors you have.
Yeah, no, totally
Yeah.
get that. Totally get that too. It does because with the way that the indigenous art is that with the more colors they can have, it really brings a vibrancy to it. So I'm
Yeah.
100% with you on that one. So, all right, we go to the part of the podcast I take over just the tiniest bit.
Sure.
And we do my team of the week and my power rankings really quickly. Again, as I say many times, my power rankings are always within the last 5 games. And with my team of the week, I do it just a little bit different. I kind of lean on goals and score involvement. So there may be a few names that are going to throw some people off. So stay with me here. So team of the week, we'll start on the defensive side again. I coach a team up here, so we got to start on the defensive side. And the fullback line sees Jake Colin-Jasny of the Geelong Cats, Essendon's Jordan Ridley, and Melbourne's Stephen May. In the
Mhm.
halfback line, we see North Melbourne's Harry Sheasel, Geelong's Max Holmes, and Adelaide's Lockie Scholl. Through the center on the wings, yes, I give love to the wings, Nick Hind of the Essendon Bombers and Jordan Dawson of the Adelaide Crows. Through the middle, we see Chad Warner with his 4 goals of the Sydney Swans and Port Adelaide's Ollie Wines and Zach Butters. Through the
Mhm.
ruck, I got to give my tips to him. Max gone again, continuing his sensational form this season. On the half forward line, we see Richmond's Dusty Martin, Carlton's Charlie Curnow, and Carlton's Zach Williams. And the full
Yep.
forward line, we see Hawthorn's Jack Gunston, Port Adelaide's Todd Marshall, and GWS's Jake Riccardi. On the bench, I have one defender, ruck, midfielder, and forward, one from each part of the ground. Defender, Jack Sinclair of the St. Kilda Saints. The Western Bulldogs, ruck, Tim English. Through the centers, Melbourne's Jack Viney, and the forward, Adelaide's Chance Jones. So I know it's a
Yep.
lot of names really quickly. Your thoughts on team of the week?
I don't mind it. I think Colin Jasny probably could get subbed out for someone else, but I'm really surprised that you haven't put this player on the bench. Lee
Okay.
Kalir, he needs to be on the bench this week. Like, if he did not have the game that he had in defense, he was so much more influential to that game than Jack Sinclair was as the defender.
Hmm.
He needs to be there. Like, maybe not on field, I understand, but
Hmm.
this guy, 2 marks, 2 minutes left of the game, how influential he was. Chuck him in there, Donny.
I 100%. The caveat of the goal scored kind of sometimes gets me in weeks like this. Like I
Yeah,
would have loved to get Leak in there, but every single one of the defenders that I said kicked a goal this week. So
yeah,
it's like it kind of made my job a little bit easier. But I
yeah.
literally I was so tempted to tuck him in there. So that's kind of my explanation on that. I'm 100. Like if another set of bench, like if I had a fifth bench player, I probably would have went with Legalier. I
Mm.
probably would have because he was absolutely
Maybe he
sensational.
can be the sub. Maybe
Yeah,
have like
he'll
a
be the
sub
sub.
player. He'll
Yeah,
be the
he'll be the
sub. Yep.
sub. I really should add that eventually on for later on the year. All right, we'll go to the power rankings again. This is the last 5 games. This is the what have you done for me lately rankings. So we'll start off number 5, the Fremantle Dockers. Number
Mhm.
4, the Port Adelaide Power. Number 3, the Collingwood Magpies. Number 2, the Essendon Bombers. And number 1, the Sydney Swans. So again, not very difficult. Very few changes when it comes to it. Most teams that were in the 5 last week won. I think Carlton was the only one that might have been in that lost last week. So that is it for the power rankings. We jump to it. I know we're still early in the week. Teams still need to come out, but we have to do tipping. We have to tip
Yep.
how this
Let's
week's
do it.
going to go. We do have 4 teams with the bye with Brisbane, North, Sydney, and GWS taking a seat this week and an absolute cracker to start off Thursday night footy as Port Adelaide hosts the Carlton Blues at the Adelaide Oval. What do you like in this one?
It's a real tricky one. Like, I always go for the home side especially when it's Port playing at home. I don't know. I think it really depends on what happens with Connor Rosie. If he doesn't play, if he's not fit, I'm going to give it to Carlton. I know they're not the favourites. I don't know if you guys have the betting, but they're $2.20
Hmm.
against. So Port Adelaide is definitely the favourite with the punters. But yeah, I think Carlton. They're just too good. If
I
Zach Williams keeps playing forward, it just offers something more for them. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it'll be interesting. Port Adelaide's one of the few teams that's got multiple tall defenders. It'll be
Mm-hmm.
interesting to see how they handle that. Even without Butters, I think Boak and Wines are kind of rewinding the clock a little bit and playing pretty well. So I think they can kind of even up that matchup between them, Walsh and Cripps, and Kennedy with I think Chera is still out. So I don't think Carlton's 100% there. The question will be is does Charlie Dixon play? Does Todd Marshall play? Does Willie Willie play? Because those three there could give Wiedering and some of that back line some trouble. Jason Horn Francis is also one of those that
Mm,
can shift forward, and I'm just not sure Carlton has the defenders to stop them. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Saad's back or not. Saad is back. I forgot. Saad did play in this last round. So I'm with you. I'm going to tip Port Adelaide only because at home, Port tends to play really, really well. And Carlton still has not 100% convinced me that they're the dominant team that they should be. There have been games that they've shown some weakness when it comes to it, and if you look at it, teams have been able to bully them in their sweet spot, and that is the center clearance, and
mm,
this is one of the few teams that can do that. DeConning had himself an interesting game. I'm interested to see is it Jordan Sweet? Is it who does he face in the who does he face in the ruck battle to see? Because if DeConning can get up, then I think Carlton's got a shot. I'm going to tip Port, but this is a heck of a first game to go with because
yeah.
it really is. It's a 50-50. You could flip a coin and be just as accurate on this one. So tip
Oh,
Port,
that
but this is a cracker.
yeah. I think every game this week is like a real cracker. All the teams that are dominant, except for North Melbourne, have a bye this week. So yeah, there's a lot of very very good fixturing.
Yeah, I think there's only one that I'm sitting here going. I'm pretty obvious on who I'm going to tip on this one. I'm
Yeah.
100% with you on this one. So we jump to it as you said. We continue this interesting um round of fixtures as we see
Mm,
Marvel Stadium. Yes, ladies and
yeah.
gentlemen, Marvel Stadium host the Collingwood Magpies and the Western Bulldogs under the roof at Marvel. I think this brings the doggies a little bit closer. The fact that the Pies still have a very makeshift hold together with duct tape and spit forward line, but doggies no Naughton. I'm interested to see how this goes. They don't have Ed Richards. I think that could be a fatal blow to this doggies team. I'm going to tip the Pies in this one. Doggies are going to test them. The doggies are going to test this Pies team, but the Pies too much talent in certain places that I think the Duggies are hampered a little bit. Got the Pies in this one, but another absolute ripping game of footy.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if the fans kind of know why Collingwood, obviously, their home ground is MCG, but they play at Marvel this week. Marvel has a contract with the AFL to say every Melbourne team has to play at least one home game at Marvel Stadium. That's just the way it is. I don't know if that's when the stadium was made, that was the contract, but you'll see sometimes a Richmond or whoever plays. 100% I understand, and I agree with you. If the Dogs didn't have those injuries, I think they would have a much better chance,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't have another spare tool they can pull out of nowhere. They were already struggling with Richards through the middle and the lack of depth if someone got injured in that position. McRae hasn't been playing as well as what he has. They don't have the Bailey Smith to cover the position either. I think Collingwood has them in the bag this week. It's going to be a good game.
Mm-hmm.
Bontempelli can pull something out of his butt and win off his back this week. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I do think it's going to be Collingwood.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how does who does Moore take? Does he take Ugo Hagen or does he take Darcy? That'll be the biggest question there because
Yeah,
Frampton will get the other one, and then
yeah,
how do those youngsters those young bucks how do they handle that? And still no Cody Waitman. I think if Cody Waitman was in this, I'd be a little bit more terrified, even though Isaac Quaynor has been one of those that he can take away a small forward. If they had Cody Waitman, I'd be a little bit more confident with the Western Bulldogs, but I worry that Collingwood's defense can soak up the Western Bulldogs. And even with a makeshift forward line, Liam Jones is really all that's back on the defensive side
yeah.
that's anything worth an intercepting player. Bailey Dale is a forward running player, so he's one of those. Maybe you can catch him out the back. Which I mean, when you have a Bobby Hill, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Pies this one, they'll find a way, but this is going to be another cracker. An interesting one at the MCG as the Hawks
Mm-hmm.
host the Adelaide Crows. The Crows flying over to the MCG. This is a must win for the Crows. If they want to have themselves a shot to make finals, they have to win this. Who do you like?
It's a tough one because we saw how good Adelaide was against West Coast at home, but similar to how bad West Coast is away, Adelaide's basically the similar thing as well. Hawthorn's coming off a major win. They shouldn't have won last week. And I'm going to tip Adelaide, but Hawthorn can do it. 100% Hawthorn can do it. The odds aren't as close, but 100% Hawthorn can do it. So tipping Adelaide as the better team. On paper, they should win. As you say, a must-win game. But Hawthorn can win.
You and I literally, as I say with a few friends of mine, I said, I'm pointing to your head and mine because we are on the same wavelength. I thought the same thing when I tipped this. I'm going to tip the Crows only because I think when you have Darcy Fogarty, when you have Tex Walker, and a defense that still isn't 100% settled, a
Mm,
midfield where Riley O'Brien should have an advantage over whoever he faces ruck wise. I wish Isaac Rankin was in this game because I'd be a
yeah,
little bit more confident with them.
yeah,
But I think
me too.
Saligo, Crouch, and the midfield and Laird, I think will be okay enough in the midfield. Dawson can pitch hit through the center along with staying out on the wings. I just think the Crows have more talent, but the Hawks are a scrappy, never give up side that's getting a little bit more healthy. And Day being back, I think, is a huge plus for the Hawks. It will not shock me if the Hawks win this one. I'm going to tip the Crows, but I think the Hawks are in this. I think this comes down to the final couple of minutes. I think, unfortunately, I have a few Crows fans that I think are going to have quite the tight backside come the final 5 minutes of this game if it
Yeah,
goes any way like I think it could on that one. So we'll jump out, hop on the bird, and fly out west as we see the hapless Saints being hosted by the hapless Eagles. I'm thoroughly intrigued by this game. I mean, if you would 16th versus 15th, you'd think, oh, this is going to be a dour, boring game. I don't want to watch this. This has me a tizzy because Harley Reid at home is an absolute sensation, and I don't know what Ross is going to do. I just don't
yeah.
know. I'm going to tip the Eagles in this one. I think they're at home. I think Elliot Yo has got that the rust of getting back on it. I think they
Mm,
they perform better. I think the midfield will win. I know Rowan Marshall is the better ruck, but I think overall, I think West Coast has a stronger midfield with Kelly Reed and Yo. And I'm not super confident on this one. I'm tipping the Eagles, but this is a fascinating bottom of the table matchup.
yeah, I'm looking on paper, St Kilda should win. This should be their like make-up game, the one where they gain the confidence and then start winning more games throughout the season. But as we've spoken about, West Coast at home look really good. And the problem with teams versus West Coast is if you can beat up a Harley Reid on the field, if you can give him some attention, you can do the same thing with an Elliot Yo, then you tend to win. St Kilda aren't going to do that. There's no Brad Crouch. Um, Jack Steele is basically playing. I don't know if you know, but Optus Stadium is basically almost cut for cut size as an MCG, and
Mhm.
Steele doesn't do that well at the MCG either. So, like, he's going to have to run around a lot more. I'm tipping West Coast as well. I think it's going to be another upset. And St Kilda fans, I'm friend with a lot of people who do the podcast and whatnot, and unfortunately, you guys might be down for another loss. So it's not great.
It'll be interesting. I St. Kilda. I'm 100% with you. You look on paper, St. Kilda should win this and should win this relatively easily. But again,
Mm.
West Coast at home, Harley Reid mania, the blue and white army that is the West Coast fans that show up to every game, no matter how the team is doing. That'll be an interesting one at Optus Stadium. A fun one down in GMHBA Stadium. This is kind of almost that free hit for Geelong as
Yep.
they take on the Richmond Tigers and all of their injury issues. This should be a Cats win easily, but I just have this gut feeling Richmond's going to put a scare into these Cats. I think the Cats win it, but Richmond's starting to get a little bit healthier. Dusty Magic, smaller ground should be an
Mm.
interesting one. Cats for me, but Tigers, I think, in it up to their eyeballs.
Look, Geelong lost at home against GWS. They're not going to lose at home again, and not
Mhm.
against Richmond. If Hawkins, if Jeremy Cameron go big, like there's no stopping them. Richmond does not have a back line at the moment. Noah Bolter, I think, even played a little bit of forward last week. So yeah, they're going to get slapped. It is going to be domination, and it's going to be as someone who has a lot of Richmond fans and kind of takes pleasure in North Melbourne not losing this weekend because we're not playing, it's going to be a fun time to watch someone else get slapped.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Shy Bolton's also out in this one, so
Yeah,
unfortunately,
exactly
I
right.
think that's the loss. That's the loss that I think kind of really tips me over the edge on that one. If he was in, I think it's even more
Mm,
interesting. We're going up TIO Stadium up in Alice Springs in a game that honestly I look at it and I go, I don't know if I'm entertained or thoroughly terrified by this game because this is two
hmm.
teams that on their day have trouble scoring.
Yep.
Really good defenses, but both can't score. This could be first to 50 wins. I legitimately would not
Hmm.
surprise me if first to 50 wins in this one. As Melbourne take on the Fremont Dockers and Alice Springs, who do you like in this one?
Look, if Brad, I say Brad Scott, if Brad Scott was a smart coach, he would tell Essendon, "We're going up today." They should have been up in Gold Coast now to try and acclimatise to those conditions because right now the humidity's killer. It's basically playing in a tropical climate. Not as bad as what Darwin is, but still not fantastic. And that's probably going to be the biggest thing for them. I reckon Essendon, though, could have a chance to win. And that's the big thing for me. I think as more players start to come back, they're really hitting a strong patch, and Gold Coast are kind of the opposite way. I think there's been a couple of games that they should have won outside of the two up in Darwin. So, yeah, I'm actually going to tip Essendon, I think, this week.
Okay, I like Essendon in that one, but I was asking about Melbourne Fremantle.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, my
You're
mistake.
good.
My
No, you're
mistake. I
good.
jumped
TI,
ahead.
Alice Springs.
I saw TIO Alice Springs. I'm like, oh, they're playing up the top. Sorry, that's my bad.
You're
Melbourne
good.
versus Frio. I think Melbourne. I think Melbourne. I think it's
I'll,
probably Oliver's third best game of the year, and then he'll win it off his back.
you have a few more superstars that can hit the scoreboard with Petrarca
Mm,
and Keziah Pickett. I think are the two that could be the factors that change this game for it.
yeah,
Again, both teams have trouble scoring at times. Both teams are amazing defensively. They're very sound. Like I said, I think first team to 50 could win this one. Honestly, that's how good both of these defenses can be. Be interesting up in Alice Springs what the weather will be like to kind of see how that changes. I'm
mm,
with you. I'm going to tip the D's. Fremantle's in this, but I'm going to tip the D's in this one. And then to go off your great analysis, I agree with you. I think Coach Scott should have them up at the Gold Coast now, just to acclimatize to
yeah,
the weather that it is now. I'm going to tip the Bombers only because I think this is when, again, the Suns, when they play teams on the top part of the ladder, struggle a little bit. I know they've
yeah,
wanted to make People's First Stadium, Heritage Bank, whatever the heck they're going to call it these days. They
mhm,
want to make that a fortress. That's great, but I still don't think you've got the roster yet to be able to do that. There's still going to be some inconsistency because there's a lot of young talent that still is not 100% consistent. I'm with you. I'm going to tip the Bombers in this one. Suns are in this. Suns will give this a mighty crack. It again will not shock me if they win it either. But I think the Bombers just too good. They've got just enough offense. They are humming right now, and they're probably thinking they're lucky stars. They don't have the bye because I think right now they want to keep playing because they are playing
yeah.
magnificent footy right now. That is going to be, I think, game of the round, that last one, because it could go either way, and both teams have the ability to absolutely put on a show. So
Yeah.
that is it with the four teams
Another
taking by. Yeah.
another point another point with the Melbourne Frio game is Melbourne basically go there every year. I think this is
Mhm.
the first game that Frio's been there for a while, so they don't know the conditions as well as what Melbourne do.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yep. Since they started doing that Alice Springs thing, which I think is absolutely
Mm,
fantastic for footy. I think it's a magnificent initiative by Melbourne and several teams to try to play more games in Alice Springs and up in the top end for sure. So that is it. That is all 7 games tipped. Again, we've got 4 teams having a rest this weekend, which will be interesting to see how they come back next week. And Big J, this has been magnificent. It is great to sit down and have a chat with you. I love the podcast that you guys do. The center bounce is absolutely magnificent. I'm not a huge fantasy person, but I tune in just to kind of see what you guys have to say. So I'll give you this opportunity. Tell us a little bit about your podcast and how we can get a hold of it.
easy. So, Big J from the Centre Bounce. I do a show with Joe. I go for North. He goes for Essendon. There's a lot of banter that goes there. We mostly do super coach content. We live stream 2 days a week, Melbourne time on Monday nights and Thursday afternoons. just as the team sheets drop, that kind of thing. And we also do a lot of fantasy football super coach content throughout the week. So even if you don't like our AFL, like our fantasy stuff, every Wednesday we do drop our tips for the week and, teams that we think are going to win, things like that. So there's a bit of something for everybody. But hopefully you guys can jump on, have a look. The Centre Bounce on YouTube. There might be a link in the description for this. Same on Twitter as well, and on Facebook if that's what you guys are into.
And we'll be sure that when we put this out, we will make sure to link them so you can check out these guys' magnificent work. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for another episode of Donnie's Disposals. Again, thank you for listening. If you like and you aren't a subscriber, please like and subscribe. We love to see you come back and check out the footy content here. And again, keep an eye out. Sandful and Waffle reviews for the last month of play will be coming out later on this week as we get closer and closer to finals for both women's comps and we push further into the men's comp as well. So that'll do it for me. We'll see you again very, very soon with more footy coverage back in your ears.